Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're going to answer the question, can you copyright a character sheet? Because the answer is not as simple as it was even a week ago. And frankly, the answer is leaning more toward yes today than it was even a week ago. All right, so let's get into it. All right, so basically, this is a fascinating question because Dungeons and Dragons is not like any product in the world, right? It is so unusual and strange and transformative and evocative and wild. All right, so let's talk about it, right? Okay, so Gary Gygax comes along and he creates Dungeons and Dragons in 1974. And he says, you remember books? Well, that's one author writing a story that other people can read, right? And he goes, but like this is Mulranditure, right? Mulranditure has multiple authors, and the outcome of the story has an element of it is so when you write a story with Dungeons and Dragons, when you craft a story with Dungeons and Dragons, when you forge a story with Dungeons and Dragons, when you create a story with Dungeons and Dragons, use multiple authors. The Dungeon Master is the primary author. But he takes, or she takes, direct input from every player at the table. And every player at the table is helping to craft this story, right? And so the Dungeon Master will write most of the lines, but some lines are going to come directly from the player characters when they change the direction of the story in a way that the Dungeon Master cannot change, right? No Dungeon Master can make it so that that all players' choices are ignored, because no player group would ever allow that, okay? And that's part of Dungeons & Dragons. And then in addition to that, we're going to interrupt the decisions of the Dungeon Master, and we're going to interrupt the decisions of the player characters and change them with the random decision of polyhedral dice. Nothing like it in the world. It's a new narrative engine, okay? Now, here's where it gets crazy. So, Gary Gygax says the world you're going to build this in is systematized Tolkien, right? Like, he didn't say this directly, but this is what happened. This is my interpretation of it, okay? So, he's like humans, dwarves, elves, box standard fantasy world, primarily Tolkien, right? You'll tell your stories in this. Now, here's the question. Dungeons & Dragons has created the system that the narrative engine. But what does Dungeons & Dragons, what does Wizards of the Coast own when you tell that story? Who owns the story that is told? Does the Dungeon Master own the story? Do the player characters own the story? Does Wizards of the Coast own the story? Right? And the reality is, right now, we really don't have a real answer for that because nobody's really ever fully tested it, right? But I continue to tell you, the future of Dungeons & Dragons is braided with a cord to Magic the Gathering. Last week, for the first time in history, a gentleman copyrighted a Magic the Gathering deck list. Yes, that is right, okay? So he said, I'm going to copyright a Magic the Gathering deck list. Now, the gentleman who did it, he is considered by many to be a copyright provocateur. He specifically aims to kind of bend the copyright laws to favor generally the public, okay? By the way, this is a complex story. If you have any facts that I'm not representing correctly here, please don't hesitate to correct me in the comments below or even do your own video in response. But this is the situation as I best understand it, okay? All right, so that's what I always do. I do my reading, I do my research, and then I present it to you in the clearest way I can. Right, that's my model, right? In the limited time I have. Okay, all right. So basically, what he did was, how did he do this? Because you're like, hey, you can't just copyright a deck list, a Magic the Gathering deck list, because then nobody else could run that deck, and that's the whole point. And people copy decks every day in Magic the Gathering. But here's how he did it. It's really quite interesting. So he did it by essentially copywriting work product, okay? So think of it this way. Think of a wedding, okay? So a wedding planner goes and says, so a bride comes to a wedding planner, okay? and she says, "Hey, I want a super dope wedding. Can you do that for me? Here's $100,000." Okay, and the wedding planner says, "Yeah, no problem. I'm going to keep 20 of this, and then I'm going to use 80 of it to deliver your wedding. Okay, I'm going to keep 20K just for myself for my services." Then that wedding planner says, "Okay, you're going to have these chairs, right?" She didn't create those chairs. She didn't paint those chairs. All she did was pick them. Okay, the wedding planner. Okay. Then the wedding planner is going to say, "You're going to have this dope cake. And this dope cake, no one else in the world has it. It's done by my chef," right? Now, this chef is doing work product for me, and they're going to create this. And guess what? The cake is going to match the chairs. Yeah, right? And then she's like, "Okay, and then here's your dress," right? And she says, "Okay, your chairs, your cake, and your dress. I've chosen them all, right? I've hand-picked them. And I have worked with each one of these vendors to create the Princess Crystal Collection," right? And that's what your wedding is. It's the Princess Crystal Collection. And guess what? I guarantee you the Princess Crystal Collection, what I just sold you, will not be used for another bride for a year. So, for 1 year, nobody's going to see this unique collection that I crafted for you." That bride, as I understand it, that wedding planner's work product, she didn't create the cake, she didn't create the chair, she didn't create the dress, but she used her curation abilities to craft it, right? And that work product is fully copyrightable, right? She can copyright that. And that's what this guy did, was he worked with multiple companies, hired them, documented the hiring facts, documented the labor they went through to craft a deck, and he is copywriting the work product that made the deck. Guess what? That could be done with a Dungeons & Dragons character sheet. I could hire a company just to work on the equipment. I could hire a company just to work on the attributes, right? Are we going to roll, or are we going to use standard array, right? And we meet for 3 days to make that decision, and we do a whole lot of work product. All that is recorded, and we prove there's real work behind it, right? And then the spell list. I get a different company for the spell list, right? At that point, the U.S. copyright law allows me to copyright the work product that's gone into the design, right? So if I can do the work product that's gone into the design, and I can copyright that work product that they've created, this unique character that they've built together, it stands to reason, based on exactly the same logic, that this gentleman successfully copyrighted a Magic the Gathering deck list, that you could do exactly the same thing with a Dungeons & Dragons original player character, right? And then you could say, hey, this build, right? Then there's a possibility you could say, this half-orc cleric folk hero with this equipment cannot be played by anyone else because I own it. That's interesting. And I'll tell you right now, today, I'm not even discussing the right or the wrong of it. What I'm saying is that it's interesting. We now live in a world where it may be very, very possible to copyright a Dungeons & Dragons player character. A week ago, we didn't live in that world. We live in it now, right? And that is fascinating. What do you think? What do you think about the right or wrong? Do you think that should not be allowed, and that copyright should be changed in the U.S. to make it so that nobody could ever copyright a Dungeons & Dragons character build? Also, do you think that players should be allowed to contract these companies, and then next time somebody wants to build a human fighter sailor, right, that people need to pay them on top of having paid Wizards of the Coast for the book? What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing. And today I would like you to begin a wonderful millennium.